Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, primed for a June rally. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. My voice sounds a little off because I am unfortunately sick right now. So, like altcoins, I too am bleeding against Bitcoin. But I wanted to talk about the idea of a June rally by Bitcoin, which seems kind of out of left field. But when we look at all the data, you could envision it occurring. Okay, so don't take my word for it, right? I mean, I could sit here and say what I think's going to happen all day, but what's better is let me show you the evidence for it. And then if you think the evidence is sound, maybe you would take that position as well. Or if you don't think the evidence is sound, then maybe you would take the counter position. But I just want to show you the evidence for why I think there is a decent chance that, in fact, Bitcoin could see a June rally. So, the first thing I want to mention is we're first going to talk about some of the macro stuff. Then we're going to talk about some of the stuff on the Bitcoin price charts. Okay, so the first thing we could look at is we know that the U.S. dollar currency index, when it's moving higher in a parabolic rally, we know Bitcoin goes down. We've seen this many times in the past. And furthermore, if we just simply pull it up, you can see that over the last several months, the dollar has been in a parabolic rally. However, recently, you can see it's pulled back a bit. Okay. Now, that does not, unfortunately, mean that the dollar rally is over. It could just be taking a break for a while. But certainly, looking at the dollar have this pullback leads us to believe that risk on assets could start to do well for a few weeks. Okay? So, we have the dollar that's currently going down. That's point number one. All right? Point number two is the Nasdaq has had a pretty strong bounce off of the local bottom. Okay, pretty strong bounce, just like it did over here in March. But we also know that Bitcoin did well in March, right? The Nasdaq had a nice bounce and it went back up. And then we also know that crypto followed. Now, the interesting thing though is that crypto hasn't followed yet. The Nasdaq has bounced, but crypto has not yet followed that move. And the reason I think is because we are in a macro risk off time. And so I would argue that cryptocurrencies are inherently riskier than equities. So equities are the first to move when it looks like we might be getting at least a few weeks of some relief. And then as long as that sustains, then crypto will kind of be next in line to go up as well. But you look at the dollar, it's in a downtrend. You look at the Nasdaq and it's bounced pretty strong off of its lows. It's up currently about 7%. You look at the S&P and it's up about 6% last week, 6.5%. It's also off of its lower lows, fairly strong. All right. So to recap, dollar in a downtrend, tech stocks in an uptrend, or at least a local bounce. I don't want to call it an uptrend. I mean, let's get real, right? Tech stocks off a local bounce. We have the S&P in a local bounce as well. Now that's sort of some of the macro stuff. All right. In addition to that, let's go take a look at something we've talked about before. Now, we put out a video a few days ago on the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index. And at the time, the 90-day EMA of the Fear and Greed was actually approaching a low, but we weren't quite there yet. If you look at the 90-day EMA of the Fear and Greed, which I would argue that applying a moving average to this stuff is much better than not applying a moving average, because look, I mean, if you don't apply a moving average and you're just looking at something like this, I mean, it's just all over the place, right? I mean, what are you supposed to do with this? I mean, it was slashing like 90 back in late 2020 before we went to the 60K level. So I think applying a moving average is a bit better. And one of the things I noticed is that the 90-day EMA of the Fear and Greed is at 23.56. Why is that significant? We've never seen that before. The 90-day EMA of the Fear and Greed is lower than it's ever been, right? Than it's ever been. So you can see even in 2018, the lowest it ever went was around 23.69, I believe. 23.62, maybe slightly lower. 23.62 or so was the lowest it ever went. But we're currently at 23.56. So seems like a point for the bulls to some degree. I mean, obviously the bears are in control and they've been in control for a long time, but the bears will push for a while and then they'll give a little bit of leeway. Then the bulls will push back for a few weeks and then the bears might come in even stronger force and take us to a lower low. But when you look at this, it would make you think that we could see some type of a bounce. Another thing we've talked about are Bitcoin flat corrections. We talked about this back in January of 2022. And we talked about how there is a chance, albeit I would consider a small chance, that we are in an expanded flat correction where you put in a high, a low, a higher high, and a lower low. And if you go to look, if you look at what I drew back then, you can see that we talked about, the price of Bitcoin ultimately going and putting in a lower low at around $25,000, which is what we did, and then getting a nice move back up to the upside. Now, unfortunately, I don't necessarily think that it'll play out like this, but with that said, it could, right? Like it could play out, and we should follow it until proven otherwise, okay? So, while I don't think that Bitcoin is going to rally to sustained new highs within a few months, I would argue that it's at least something that's going to be argued about for a couple more months. So, like, if we do get a bounce in June, then a lot of people might point to something like this and say, well, it makes it look like we are following something like this. And that might get people to YOLO back in just for us to go put in a lower low. I don't know. But it seems like there could be some people looking at this and thinking that we do get that bounce back up. Now, these are sort of some macro things, some things we talked about before. What if we just go look at the Bitcoin price chart? Would it support a rally in June? I would argue that it would. We're currently, assuming Bitcoin closes the week, below 30K, then we're looking at our 9th red week in a row, right? Our 9th. It would seem to me that at some point we need to see some relief back up to the upside, right? And if you think about it, Bitcoin had only ever seen 6 red weekly candles in a row on some exchanges before. And now we're looking at number 9. Before this downtrend started, Bitcoin was at 48K. Like, think about that for a minute, okay? 2 months ago, when this downtrend started, Bitcoin was at 48K. So it makes me think there's probably some people that are going to be like, wait a minute, like, Bitcoin was at 48K 2 months ago, but Bitcoin's the same thing that it was 2 months ago. So why is it $20,000 cheaper, right? So then that will lead to some relief back up to the upside after getting 9 red weeks in a row. So I'm thinking if we do see some type of a bounce back up, it would look something like this, and then we'll have to figure out if it's actually going to be a sustained price. I mean, I think there's a good chance we could come straight back down, but I do want to talk about this potential relief bounce. Now, what are some other things that we could look to talk about a potential relief rally in June? We have the 9 red weekly candles. We have the dollar in a downtrend. We have tech stocks and the S&P back in an uptrend, or at least a local bounce off of their lows. We have the fear and greed index lower than it's ever been. You could argue that it's a flat correction, though I don't really think it is at the end of the day. I mean, I think we might think that it is for a few more weeks, but I don't really think that's going to play out, especially given everything going on in the macro, right? So then what if we look at the bear market structure? All right, let's look at bear market structure in the past, okay? What do you notice upon the first lower low? Okay, so every single time Bitcoin is in one of these bear markets that we all love so much, we ultimately put in a lower low, right? However, the first lower low has never been the market cycle bottom, right? This was the lower low, but it wasn't the cycle bottom, it was the next one. In 2018, this was the lower low, but it wasn't the cycle bottom, it was the next one. This is the lower low. It would stand to reason that it's likely not the cycle bottom. It could be later on. But what do you notice? What do you notice about the lower low? After you put the lower low in, we do see some type of relief rally. In 2014, we got a 78% rally. In 2018, we got about a 45% rally. Here, let's assume that if we got a 45% rally, would take us back to 37K. If it weren't quite that strong and we went up, say, like 32%, it might take us back to 35K, something like that, right? But you can see in all 3 scenarios, upon the lower low, we did get a relief rally, right? Low, relief rally. Lower low, relief rally. Lower low, What comes next, right? A relief rally, okay? So that's another thing, right? From the perspective of putting in a lower low, you would expect some type of relief rally. If we narrow this down a little bit more and just compare it to 2018, what you'll notice, and actually I'm going to switch this over to the daily time frame, and we're going to talk about the 200-day moving average, okay? What you'll notice is that we had the low, we had the higher low, we had the rejection off the 200-day, we had the failure to put in a higher low, we had a lower low, and then a rally back up to the trend line or the 200-day moving average again, okay? Now, arguably, we're 1 month ahead of where we were in 2018, okay? So let's expand this out. So here we are, we're putting in a low, a higher low, a rejection off the 200-day, a failure to put in a higher low, an actual lower low. And then if we rally back up to this level, you can imagine expanding the 200-day moving average out over here. If we rally back up, I mean, that would be a pretty nice rally if we go all the way back to 40K. But if something like that were to happen, it would be somewhat poetic because we know that that's been a fairly strong resistance point in the past, right? That $40,000 to $42,000 level that we've seen many times, we've seen rejected many times in the past. So if we do see some type of a rally back up to the 200-day moving average, it would be in line with what we saw in 2018. Now, why June, right? Why not August or some other month? Well, I mean, it could be. I don't know, right? But the reason why I'm saying June is this top was in December. This one was in November. This first low was in February. This one was in January. The rejection off the 200-day in 2018 was in May, and here it was in April. The failure to put in a higher low was in June. Here it was in May. The lower low occurred in 2018. It occurred in June. Here it occurred in May. The rally back up to the 200-day moving average in 2018 occurred in July. So I'm arguing that if we just continue on, the rally back to the 200-day would occur in June. You know, I mean, look, guys, it's not rocket science. It's just looking at a trend before and saying, well, you know, if it happened again, maybe it'll, you know, we'll see the same type of thing. But it seems to me like there is some evidence. There's enough evidence to at least contend that we could in fact see a surge back up to the upside. Okay, now, what if we, you know, and another thing too, the other reason as well, and I know some of you guys aren't huge fans of Ether, and I'll tell you right now, I think Ether is going to bleed against Bitcoin for a while. I mean, I said that many times, but another reason that would potentially support a Bitcoin rally would be the fact that you have things like Ethereum at their sort of like these macro lows, right? So, you know, there's a decent chance that Ether USD would rally back up, and then maybe we have to retest it, and then we could go below, right? But after seeing this many weeks in a row, I do wonder if the bears really have enough strength to push us through without seeing some type of a bounce first, okay? So it seems to me like there's a lot of reasons to think that a relief rally could occur in June. Now, here's what I want you to focus on in a relief rally. Look at the Bitcoin dominance. If the Bitcoin dominance is going higher, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. So that means that alts are likely still going to bleed against Bitcoin even in a sustained relief rally. And when I say sustained, I mean more than like 3 days. I mean like 3 weeks or something. So like alts are probably still going to bleed against Bitcoin, but alt USD pairs could in fact still go up. Okay, so if Bitcoin rallies against the US dollar, you would expect some relief on alt USD pairs, but alt Bitcoin pairs are still likely in a downtrend. So, you know, that's, I think, what to watch for. And I think I've provided the evidence to show why I think we could see a relief rally in June. The main counter evidence to that would be to go back and look and look at Bitcoin on the weekly. So if you were to try to say, well, if Bitcoin doesn't rally in June, what would have occurred to, you know, that you could point to? Well, if you look at, say, like the 100 week and the 200 week, normally once you go below the 100 week, like in 2018 when we went below the 100 week, we pretty quickly went to the 200 week, right? Like it occurred fairly quickly. So, you know, I look at this and say, well, I mean, if it occurs quickly again, there might not be any relief rally in June, and maybe it'll get pushed off one more month and it'll occur in July. But that might be some piece of counter evidence. But then the counterpoint to that is that when we broke below the 100 week in 2014, we still saw the relief rally back up before going down to the 200 week SMA. So let's see if it plays out. Again, I don't really know if it will or not. This is just my best guess, looking at a lot of different indicators and saying it seems like we are due for some type of relief, especially if equities continue to do relatively well. Let me know if you guys agree, disagree in the comments. Remember to check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We currently have a sale going on, so lock in the low rate. Subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.